To all of you joining us. Good morning and welcome. And if you would like, while we wait, we would love to know where you are listening to us from. So feel free to use chat. Um, you know, put what city, state you're in. That way, your fellow attendees can see who's on. And there's probably a good chance that there's people that you know that are on this call. Like I see Dorothy Novak. I know Dorothy. Hi, Dorothy. I know we have lots of people from the Blue Ridge chapter, which I know makes Tori, Staci, and Rebekah very happy, as well as from the NAWIC chapter. See lots of familiar CFMA names on here. Well, I have 11 o'clock, so shall we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. So good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are so very excited to have you today on our Queen's Gambit Women Making Bold Moves in Construction webinar. Before we jump into the webinar, I do want to take a second and I want to acknowledge why we're all here and the group that put this together. So back in 1998, the National Association of Women in Construction, also known as NAWIC, created Women in Construction Week. And this is a week that recognizes women in the construction industry, and it always takes place annually during the first full week in March. So I just want to thank NAWIC personally for putting this together and for carrying it through for so many years. We shouldn't just have one week celebrating women, but it's really great that there is a focus in the industry that puts a spotlight on women during Women's History Month, which is also in March. So I'm joined by a phenomenal group of women today. And so I am Samantha Lake. I am the COO of ProNovos. Some of you might know me from my CFMA days, but I want to let our panelists introduce themselves to you today, and then we will jump into the webinar.
Good morning. It's still good morning. I'm Staci Hurst. I'm the CFO for Ennis Electric. Been here about 14 years.
My name's Rebekah Kuller. I'm the CFO at Nielsen Builders, a general contractor in Harrisonburg, and I've been in my role for almost 6 years.
And I'm Tori, Terrell. I'm VP of Finance for Design Electric. Our headquarters in Charlottesville, Virginia. Obviously, we're electrical sub, and I've been here for almost 21 years.
All right. And so for listening today, we would like to know, what does your role look like? And so to help us get to know who we're speaking to today and kind of adapt our presentation, you're going to see a poll up on your screen right now. If you could take a second and just share with us, what is your role within the industry? And I'm seeing a nice mix of CEOs, CFOs, VPs, controllers, project managers, decent amount of others as well. I think the only thing we don't have represented here today is a COO. So I do like that we have a nice sampling of different roles within the industry. So here is who is on the call today. So I think that no matter what your role is in the industry, the information we're going to share with you today is going to be extremely valuable. So let's jump into this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is navigating obstacles. So as we know, the construction industry is high pressure, it's fast paced, it is focusing on getting the job done as efficiently as possible. So with so many moving parts, it's easy for leadership to prioritize tasks over people, which can sometimes lead individuals, especially those who don't naturally advocate for themselves, being overlooked. Staci, I want to start with you. Can you share a challenge that you faced in your career and how you navigated it?
I have a very prime example for this. Even construction financial manager, introvert is kind of a natural personality type. So I'm a behind the scenes, get her done kind of girl. And so I started my career as, bookkeeper that moved into a controller. And, at some point in your career, you master everything you can know in that level. And at that time in my career, I was hungry to know more. I wanted to advance. And where I was working at the time, my immediate supervisor failed to see that potential in me. And I tried, to advance as much as I could and, to get gratification from like your CPA firms, the third party professionals is kind of all I needed to like know that I was doing a great job. And so I was invited one time to go to an executive CPA conference from our CPA firm. And that same supervisor told me that I was not needed. I did not need to go. It was mainly for the executive committee at our position. But if I felt the need to go, and I could. And so I decided I was going to go. On the way there, I was also the same person. We had a conversation about my career, my future, and I was told that because I did not go through the construction ranks through our apprenticeship field, that I would never advance to executiveship or be a CFO. So at that point in my career, it deeply affected me. I still continued to do what I felt was right, and that's doing a good job. I stayed consistent with my work, but it became stagnant, in my career. I kind of grew resentful. I actually attempted to quit, and so I took it past that one supervisor, and eventually we got through that, and I stayed resilient, and now I'm in the executive status of a CFO. So I kind of worked through those boundaries.
And I had kind of the opposite experience of Staci. I advocated more for myself when I was younger and developed a reputation for being outspoken. And I was told that I could be overlooked for promotions in the future. So sacrifice and tactics were needed on my part, and I toned it way down. Took some time for some deliberate introspection. And that does require a lot of balance, though. So now I challenge myself to continue to grow and professionally speak up for myself and others. And a powerful piece that has helped my strategy really came from helping to form my local CFMA chapter and being on that founding board of directors. Looking back, my advancement with that chapter has been one step ahead of my professional advancement, which set me up for success in my current role. And so just quick plug here, joining associations and nonprofit boards is a great opportunity to grow, and it's very low risk. And as you can see on this slide, I was one female on this board with 5 gentlemen. I wasn't intimidated, though. I've often found myself as the only female at the table, and these men were extremely welcoming and have contributed to my professional growth in ways they may never fully understand.
I love that. I had a similar experience to you, Tori, where I, was raised and being told I could be anything I want to be. So when I got into the workplace, I was confident, I was direct, and my performance reviews reflected that I was too direct and too aggressive and too assertive. And maybe while other genders didn't get that as a negative, I did. But I prioritized tasks and accomplishing things over relationships. And so those isolated relationships, they did hold me back early on. And it's probably, looking back, why I moved around at companies at the time. So certainly just trying to balance out the task versus relationship element. But my parents were baby boomers, and for those of you who grew up with those type of parents, they raised us millennials saying you can be anything you want to be. And I took that very seriously, but maybe the generation ahead of me, the Gen X generation, wasn't raised in that way and didn't always appreciate my can do anything I want attitude.
Rebekah, I am so glad you brought up the different generations, because this plays a significant role into how we are perceived and the misunderstandings behind our actions, as well as gender expectations, which sometimes, as we know, can create roadblocks in our career growth. But before I go any further, I just want to make sure that the audience, we're all on the same page for what I mean when I talk about these different generations. So right now, there are 6 generations that currently exist in society. The oldest being the silent generation. For me, this is my grandparents' generation. They're 1928 to 1946. Their values and the way that they were raised are really defined by loyalty, discipline, and sustainability. They were the parents of the baby boomers, born between 1947 and 1964. Based on how they were raised, their main value propositions are duty, teamwork, and loyalty. Baby boomers gave birth to Gen X as well as millennials. And so Gen X, 1965 to 1980, they are known for their independence, their flexibility, and being very pragmatic. Next, we have the largest generation in society today, which all 3 of us are from. We are the millennials. We are known for being highly collaborative, innovative, and purpose-driven. The next generation, this is the one behind us, Gen Z. They are 1997 to 2012. A lot of you probably have children from this generation. They are known for being very inclusive, adaptable, and having an entrepreneurial spirit. Hence why every single one of these kids wants to be a YouTube or TikTok star. And then our newest generation that is still forming, they're still in their formative years. That is the Alpha generation. They are known for valuing digital fluency, adaptability, and creativity. So before we go any further, I have another poll just out of curiosity to know which generations are being represented here on the call today. So go ahead and let us know. Are you from the silent generation, a baby boomer, Gen X, or millennials? And I am happy to see a lot of fellow millennials are on this call, as well as some Gen Xers and a handful of Gen Z, which is awesome to see. So as everybody is answering, I just want to talk about kind of this dynamic within the generations. Like this is something that I'm very passionate about because a lot of workplace misunderstandings and conflict arises because of how you were raised and what your expectations are. So like how this might play out in the real world scenario. So you were a female and you're female, let's say a millennial female, and you have a male boss who's a baby boomer. Based on their generational values, they likely prefer their employees to be self-sufficient and not needing a lot of hand-holding because that's how they were raised by their parents and that's how their bosses treated them. However, if you're a millennial woman, you might be highly collaborative, talk a lot, and you might value collaboration and feedback and being purpose-driven in all your work. So you might ask a lot of questions. This can create conflict because it can be seen as you being too needy, you not knowing how to do your job, you need too much hand-holding, when all you're trying to do is build relationships and be inclusive with others and not trying to take charge. Because again, that's what you learned from your parents and being socialized through our formative years in elementary and middle school. So this can really impact how we are seen as women, especially with the gender expectations as well. Think about the housewife perception of a woman in the 1950s. And now you have these millennial women who are in stark contrast of that perception. And I'm using generalizations here because typically it's the generalizations that tend to create the conflict. So I'm just curious, Staci, what are your thoughts on the roles that the different generations play within the workplace?
Great question. Reflecting back on my example, at the time, that was a baby boomer boss, right? So he was raised in a different culture environment. And I like to use the tagline frame of reference. So basically, you're shaped by your personal experiences, your upbringings, your education, your culture, like what are you exposed to in your dynamic? And then, you carry those same perceptions throughout your career, and the world they grew up in is not the same world that we're growing up in today. So for me, that what was helpful is to kind of take the emotions out of it and look at it more logically and adapt and be understanding of where their frame of reference is coming from and where mine is, and let's meet in the middle.
Yeah, and for me, growing up in the same home with my grandparents, they were born in the 20s. That helped me understand generational differences from a very young age. And so I found that I can easily adapt my approach and style based on who I'm talking to generationally. Just like chess, when you need patience depending on who you're playing with or speaking to.
Tori, I'm really glad you brought up the concept of patience because that's another thing with the different generations that we're seeing. I mean, think about I can speak from my own experience. I am the generation that knew what life was like before technology, but I was also in kindergarten at a computer magnet school. So I've been on a computer since I was 6 years old. So I had, 5 years of no technology, but I still was played by the rules of Gen X. Come home when the street lights are on, you drink out of a garden hose, So I can see both sides. And so I love the idea of a frame of reference, but also patience. Because when it comes to technology, our expectations on how quickly things get done are extremely accelerated. So I'm always the change agent that comes into an organization or into a committee, and immediately my brain works so much faster and I can see all the possibilities. And I'm like, okay, let's get stuff done. We just need to do X, Y, Z. And if you are from a different generation and you did not grow up with that kind of rapid rate of change, I'm going to come in and I'm going to create some problems for you. And we're probably not going to get along because of the perceptions I have and how quickly things should be done. And the same is true when it comes to our careers. So when you think about the different career progression, and I've seen this time and time again with different generations, is, a lot of people from the silent generation, baby boomers, and some of Gen X, they had this traditional career path, very stair step. You go here, you go here, you go here, you go here. Well, with our generation, things took a significant turn. There are all sorts of non-traditional career paths that we are taking. I mean, for instance, with my background, I went because I took the association route for many years of my career, and there was a lot more opportunity. So I was able to go from training and development to a marketing director role to a marketing VP role by the age of 30. And by the age of 39, I was COO. That is not a traditional career path. And I have met with a lot of my elders who quite can't understand how I got to where I am so quickly because, Staci, going back to your frame of reference, they're comparing my experience through their own frame of reference and what it was like for them. So that's where I tend to see a lot of conflict happening as you're looking at things through your own frame of reference. And your expectations when it comes to patients are a little bit different. So I have one more interactive poll for you all. Very curious to see those on the call today. What does your career path look like? Have you had a traditional career path, or has it been a little bit more untraditional? And I guess as we wait, I'm curious, Rebekah, what's your career path look like?
Sure. I probably moved through things a bit of a straight line in some ways. And I think just because something was an obstacle for someone, just because it took somebody 15 years to get where they are, doesn't mean that for a different person, that should be a 15-year path. Maybe it's a 20-year path. Maybe it's a 5-year path. We're all coming in, with different experiences and different skill sets. So just being aware of that. And for that matter, I think it needs to be mentioned here, just because something was an obstacle for you, whether that's as a female or male or just anything in your role, that doesn't mean it needs to be for someone else. If you worked hard to knock that obstacle down, let's keep it down. And going back to kind of what a couple of you referenced, one thing that I really try to bring in my career with these different generations and different backgrounds is seeking first to understand and then to be understood, like from Stephen Covey, and we may get more into that as we go on. There we go. But that really helps me as an extrovert, as somebody who wants to talk first, to step back and go, where is this person coming from? Whether it is like what Staci was talking about with their gender or their age or their career experiences. And then before I can hopefully communicate for them to understand me. And I just have to remind myself in my career that, coming from a place of differences, that allows you to have access to places and spaces that brings a unique value to your company. And so that kind of gives me confidence, when you're moving through your career, maybe at a faster pace than you're expected to be.
That's such a good point. Like the differences in the idea of diversity within the workplace, right? Nobody wants to be in the sea of same. You want people with different experiences, even brain chemistry. I mean, last year during this time, Tori was a guest again, but we talked about just why women are different in the workplace, and it has to do with just brain chemistry. Our brains are wired differently than men's, so you want this like nice mix, especially on your leadership team. So you have this diversity of thoughts, which can lead to efficiency. So that's the next topic that we're going to switch to, is talking about, in construction, there is this balance of short-term needs with long-term strategy. So Tori, what are some of the most efficient ways that you've streamlined either financial processes or the workflows within your organization?
When I joined our leadership team in 2017, succession planning was a gaping hole in our strategic plan. So I found a mentor, we started working on it, and eventually I brought EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System, to the leadership team as an option for us. We needed to take a proactive view of succession planning, not waiting until a need was imminent or someone left. We needed to focus on our people. So we hired an HR professional who could help us become a talent magnet. These are times that, just like in chess, when you sacrifice lesser pieces for greater strategic advantages. Professionally, I've had to sacrifice. Think about what's the long-term outcome, 2 or 3 steps ahead in order for the change to happen that I can see or that I know needs to happen. I recognize through this that my male counterparts on our leadership team, they're great about thinking something like the life cycle of a job rather than the life cycles of these roles. So adapting my communication to explain it in a way that they can relate to and also help them make it their idea too certainly helps.
Yeah, and I think efficiency, I think that's something that transcends genders and it's easy for us to all get on board with. And for me, I try to balance quick wins for efficiency. So taking advantage of low hanging fruit, kind of shuffling pieces around in order to have margin for the big changes. It's hard to implement. And yeah, this just kind of looking at a critical path. It's hard to implement big change if you're so stuck in all the little day to day. So how can you streamline a few things in order to have the margin to do the bigger things? Whenever I start somewhere new, I always look into what is the critical path for closing the month as an accountant and getting out the financial statements and who's involved, what are the delays in that, and kind of repurposing that. And that allows me to kind of implement that on a monthly basis, both into what is the organization doing quarterly and annually, and put, all of those reports and initiatives into the bigger picture strategy.
And then for me, moving from controller into CFO, I saw there was an immediate short-term need to bridge the communication between different departments. So estimating, business development. And so we have Sage 300. It's a dated system. Trying to get a report that bridged the gap between all of the different silos, nearly impossible. So I took the time to invent this massive Excel spreadsheet, and you can see an example on the screen where it collaborates projected revenue for the year, our backlog, the margins that we expect it to be, cash inflow, outflow, our backlog, and then mainly at the very bottom, you can see the manpower. And so this gave our executive team a high level, 10 feet of, look down of where do we need to focus on what we're bidding? How aggressive do we need to be for the bidding? Do we need to hire? What foremen are coming up for the next job? And so this gave us a short-term strategic analysis. So then inevitably we're going to have to shop ERP software. And now that we have this and we like it, when we go to shop that new software, it's going to be one of those, how can we solve this problem, make it automated? So I'm not manually doing this. And I did put this in, Sam, I think we put this in the resources, so you can download it and tweak it how you need to, but it's a useful tool for us.
And Staci, I will talk to you after this because your automation problems, I might know a company that can help you with that.
Okay.
But I love that we're talking about technology, especially when it comes to, evolving and really leveraging the different ways that minds work. So whether it's a male or female, if you find somebody in your company who's super passionate, and oftentimes you might see somebody in the company who might not be tech savvy, but they know their tech issues, right? So then find those people who love technology, create a committee, bring them together, because now we're going to talk about technology adoption. And this is probably in my career working in tech, this is one of the hardest barriers to overcome. Because oftentimes, especially in construction, where you are dealing with people who like to use their hands, right? They like to be building things. And now we're going to throw technology at them. And if they're not comfortable, they're going to resist. So I'm curious to know from everybody here today, what have you done to leverage the technology within your organizations, and what tactics have you used to gain buy-in, both from your leadership teams as well as from your field teams? So Rebekah, let's start with you.
Okay, sure. And Sam, like you, I had a computer in kindergarten and was on AOL and before I was in double-digit ages. So I come into the workplace and replace my predecessor who retired, and he was doing things in a lot of ways by hand. So yeah, those are just two completely different mindsets. So I don't want to make it scary or overwhelming for anybody. And one small thing is, taking advantage of maybe summer help or internship. So we had an intern that implemented equipment tracking software a few years ago. And shortly after, we had a Connex get broken into and the tools were stolen out of it. Well, it was very easy for us to report to the insurance company what was in there and what was stolen and get a settlement for that equipment. And that was all because of technology. So that small win kind of put it in the back of our minds to think, we're on Sage 300. We're in a similar boat of this isn't a long-term system that we should be using. So last fall, I kind of shared at our board, we need to look into something. And would you guys be willing to look into something? Instead of pitching it as let's change, it's maybe start with let's look into something. So we've been in a few month process of investigating new software, working with a third-party company for that. And that's just been a really positive experience. And out of that, we've learned in the discovery process all of those manual processes that could be improved significantly with technology. So I think just in that investigation, it's created an awareness of how much better things could be.
Right. Rebekah too. So we're going to be in that same rodeo that you're in, and it's a lot. But so what I'm finding, we just upgraded our estimating software. And so in my mind, okay, is it an easy dump from the estimating software to then import it into the new accounting ERP system? So like different departments are going to use different software, and do they integrate? Which, that's going to be something that we need to look into. We have TimberScan for our AP, which has been, I think, a great win. We've been using that for over 10 years. So that's all paperless. And then on the Sage side, we have My Assistants for the easy reports that can take time to do, but they just naturally spit them out. We are going to look into potentially outsourcing our AP payables. We haven't done that yet. We've hosted our ERP system in the cloud, which then allows users to work remote. COVID kind of proved that we can work remote. So like hosting that in a cloud setting enables that to happen more efficiently. But you had mentioned creating a committee. So we implemented Acora, which is an HR software. We did that last year. And, you're sold like, oh, in 2 months, you'll be up and running. So we built a committee and the champion of who was going to mainly lead that. But it took a year to get through the training and implement it, because there's always a kink and there's always going to be issues you have to work through. So my recommendation is like, don't try to change everything at once. Like, implement the software, work out the kinks, and then take a breath so you don't burn your team out. And then finally, my goal this year is to create an AI committee. We have a lot of, younger staff and hungry to learn. And I personally just don't have all the time to go explore. So if we have a nice collaborative committee, maybe we can master the whole AI and what's upcoming.
That's good.
Yeah, and our company's always been very technology forward, but currently with this boom in software, we've been taking things slowly. So again, coming back to patience, making the right moves at the right time. We replaced our server recently, and so we also implemented an HRIS in 2021. Also, yes, taking a couple years to fully build that out, but we want to move from Sage 300 to a solution that's in the cloud. So for us, it's going to be all about timing, making those right decisions at the right time. Again, don't want to overwhelm our team. There's so much new technology that it can be distracting.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the lessons I want to share with everybody today is, when it comes to taking your time, I want to kind of share with a process that I take. So this is an example of a tech stack, which was a problem that I was dealing with at a previous organization. And, a lot of the stakeholders had a lot of issues because when you see this tech stack, we see like our central database here. What do you all notice about these arrows from that central database?
One way.
What was that? One way, yeah.
Back to it, yeah.
Right. So now you have all this data that is siloed. And I know that's a really big problem for a lot of organizations is you might have like a central database. Maybe for you all, it's your ERP, and you have all these other things and they just kind of exist out there and nothing is tying them back together. So now you have to go to, a half dozen different solutions to find data. And then you're maybe trying to use Power BI, or you're trying to create Excel sheets that's bringing all the data get together. And if it's Power BI, now you have to have an entire team that's trying to, create this solution that, ties everything together, or you're manually doing it with Excel. So that was kind of the problem that we identified by looking at the tech stack. So after creating the committee, speaking to people, talking to all of the internal stakeholders, we realized that, the solution and what we needed was almost like this inverted triangle, with the core systems, but having a central location that all the systems talk to. So you had two-way communication and everything flowed back to a central database. Right. So now you see there are certain external solutions that we knew didn't need to write back in, but we just needed to do authentication and verification with it. So I encourage everybody to draw out your technology. I was speaking with one prospect who they have over 500 different technologies and applications. And when they were going through, sometimes they're like, you know what, if this is what this, superintendent wants to use, it's minimal, it's fine. It's a tool that they're using for their team. But then as the company started growing and scaling, they realized that there was a massive disconnect between how they were working versus how the rest of the field was working. So I share this with you because depending on where you're at in your growth journey as a company, you might be able to get by with kind of bootstrapping some technology together, but always have a map and a visual. That way, when you start growing and evolving and things get bigger and more cumbersome, you now know exactly where everything is at and what you need to do or what problems you want to overcome. And with technology planning too, it's not always just about solving problems. It's about evolving. Like, where do you want to see your company? Do you want to be 3 steps ahead of the competition in terms of efficiency and having that business intelligence to make, instant decisions? Or are you perfectly okay with making decisions on data that's 30 days old? That's a question that you will have to answer for your own companies. But that's kind of the role technology is going to play in helping shape efficiency for you and your team. So we talked about people when it came to overcoming, the resistance to technology. So now let's dive deeper because a lot of that's kind of come into the culture that your organization is creating. So we know inclusive workspaces foster innovation and better decision making. So I'm curious to know what initiatives or leadership strategies have you implemented to create an environment where everyone, regardless of their background, feels valued and supported. So Tori, let's start with you.
So I started off kind of small. My first job was working at a florist. So when someone would, have a death in the family or someone had a baby, I was like, can I send flowers? It wasn't overwhelming for me because I knew what to order. So that was one thing I started with. Later in my career, I really started championing for the Administrative Professionals Day and Bosses Day, Employee Appreciation Day, Women in Construction Week. As you can see here on the picture, I got those shirts and made up some Stanleys with their logo and our mission that says proactively empowering women in construction. And then our company picnic. We have tried lots of things over the years, and it was a hard sell at first, but I said, you know what is our goal here with the company picnic? We want to see everybody. We want to get everybody there. How do we do that? Let's do it during the week. Let's do it at the end of the work week. Let's let people come for lunch. We pay them. We have our vendors involved to donate items that we raffle off now. Sometimes it's the only time we see certain people all year long. But again, together we were able to accomplish the goal that we really wanted with the company picnic. And now everyone that comes, they go home with something. And so, the key to this change was getting the leadership team to buy in. I didn't want it to just be a one-off event, or then your culture doesn't change. And thankfully, our culture has really embraced this. And now others have taken over a lot of these duties that I helped to incorporate.
So you're a VP of Finance, typically not the role a VP of Finance or a CFO would play. So what advice do you have for those listening that say, that's not my job, and just because I'm a woman, I shouldn't have to be the one that creates all of these events? What is your advice to those listening? Anybody?
So I would say start small. We're an ESOP company, and when we went over 50% ownership of employees, we created a communication committee, which then kind of invertedly is now party planning committee. So we're very similar to Design Electric. We host 2 employee appreciation events a year. And those can be anything from our hippie loving Staying Alive party, because we just celebrated 50 years. So to cornhole. We have an annual cornhole competition that our guys, they like the simplicity of it. We also do a benefit fair every year. I'll share a funny story. We didn't have the buy-in for the benefit fair in the very beginning. And So we had a $500 budget to pull off this whole fair for over 100 people. And so my team and I will be, you can get free vendors. So an independent massage therapist will come, and she's free advertising. She was giving the guys, just seated massages. So we got her for free. We made homemade food. So we did it on our $500 budget. And I would say in the beginning, we had 50% participation. Over time, we started beefing it up more and more, and a little bit of bribery. Might get a Yeti to come, or there's always some kind of swag. Nowadays, we have 80%, they're coming because they want to. We have food trucks. Of course, we still do the bribery with swag, but we have tons of raffle prizes. We've done a dedicated boot fair this past year where they all get a pair of boots, tool fair. So over time, you know what the guys and girls want, and it's what do they value. For culture, I think makes your company, and in turn will make them appreciate and want to work harder. So it comes full circle. We also do quarterly newsletters where we spotlight field job sites. We do job site lunches, announce the baby births within the company, birthday text messages. So our goal as the communication committee, AKA party planning, is to bridge the gap between the office and the field. And so we're all one, like every job is just as important as the next, because we're all pushing that same boulder up the hill.
I'm loving
For those listening who like the idea of a committee, how do you go about creating that committee?
Okay, I'll take the stand here again. For what we did, we wanted a diverse committee, not just all officers of the company or all office, personnel. So we have one apprentice, one journeyman, we have a superintendent, and then we have a few office. And then we always, even though they're not designated like on the committee, we always invite our executives, and at least always one is volunteering to come support us. So we have the buy-in from the top, but that we also poll and survey the guys and girls in the field. What do you want? And then we actually listen and make that happen.
And I guess the next part of this is, money's involved. So you talked about how you were able to do it, scrappy with $500, which is amazing. But what advice do you have for those listening on how do you go about budgeting for this and, getting the buy-in from the leadership team that, yes, we need to make this investment into our people?
Budgets are certainly important. Don't want to discount that, but I have found that if it's important, you can find the money. It's like, I'm going to do the right thing here. And that's where people first culture.
Yeah. And research has shown that there's a correlation between culture and financial success. I always remember the story, and I hope I get this right, of the CFO says to the CEO, what if we invest in our people and then they leave? And the CEO says, what if we don't? And then they stay. And I think that's where this element of culture and training is a big aspect of that. I actually just got out of a meeting before this. We had sent 3 project managers to what I would, as the money person, call expensive training. But to hear what they came back with, I instantly was like, every piece of it is worth it. And I think being inclusive in, investing in different people, that it's, not always the same, background or rank, like Staci was saying with events, let's kind of figure out how do we invest uniquely in each person or each group of people. And that's really important for me, just inviting company-wide to events, saying you could be a representative of our company. And that's something that helped me early in my career. I was the backup for when marketing couldn't find male executive, because that's how it was. But out of that led to a whole, slew of opportunities for me. Our chapter does a CFMA corporate challenge where we've raised funds for a scholarship that we actually just endowed. And those have been designed to be inclusive of basically anyone. So they're, it's not maybe a fishing trip or a full golf game outing, but how do we make it something that anybody could do? And the other part of inclusiveness that's important to me is using inclusive language. And I realize that could be a politically hot topic, but, instead of assuming that every owner is male or every admin is female or that girl at the front desk, just being careful to use different, genders or gender neutral words on those things and leave, girl or boy at home, because we're all grown-ups in the workplace.
That's spot on. I know we are coming to the end, and we still have a lot of content to cover. So I do briefly want to talk about emotional intelligence. Rebekah, that kind of ties into being mindful and just kind of being in tune with some things. So let's briefly talk about how does emotional intelligence play into leading teams effectively, and what are some of the ways this cultivates in leadership positions. So for the sake of time, Staci, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are in regards to emotional intelligence.
Sure. So I'm a good example of personal development is key here. So in my, in career, emotionally responding, I've had to learn how to hold back emotions. And, when people say stop acting like a girl and you get upset, but for me, emotions kind of equaled passion, but the real art is kind of elevating yourself and learning how to respond. So taking a deep breath, removing yourself from the trigger that makes you want to respond or get angry, and then thinking about it through it logically, going back to the frame of reference, where's this person coming from and why are they, saying what they're saying to me. I'm definitely still working on it personally. I've emotionally quit before my job, and you learn from your mistakes. Once you say a word or you type something out, you can't get it back. So it's knowing when to rein it back in.
That's really good advice. And speaking of advice, like let's skip to our next section. Like let's talk about advice for the next move. So imposter syndrome is something that many professionals face, especially in leadership roles. So how have you all overcome self-doubt, and what advice do you have others facing similar challenges? So Rebekah, let's start with you.
Yeah, I've certainly struggled with this as feeling unprepared for something. So one big thing I do is making sure I'm doing lots of trainings to stay ahead of what may come up. And then when I'm facing it, but my husband was asking me about imposter syndrome. He said, "What is that?" As I was preparing for a women's panel, and I was kind of like, "Oh, mic drop." That's kind of the fact that I'm so comfortable and used to this, and you're unaware of it. That shows kind of why we have WIC Week and why we have these things. But when you look back at history, a lot of times it was people who were what you could call an imposter. Maybe they didn't belong there, or they were unprepared for what they stepped into, that they were able to change the course of history because they were coming from a different background. So that gives me confidence.
Fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah,
but realize you're not faking it. You're there.
We're our own worst enemies and critics.
and get a mentor. I know I found mentors in multiple places, but again, in my CFMA chapter, absolutely, they've helped me to overcome these feelings. And last year I hired a therapist because why? I want to be my best self. I want to bring my best self to work, at home, everywhere. So they have been like a mentor for my mental health as well.
And Staci, you have a really great book recommendation for everybody, right?
Yep, and I'm not paid to recommend this, I will say, but I'm sure everyone's heard it, but it's a great book. It's helped me kind of step back too. You can't control others, what they're going to say to you, their frame of reference, but what you can control is how you respond to them, which is maybe I need therapy too, but I'm really trying to personal develop myself and do a better job.
I think developing ourselves, one of the aspects of that, especially as females, is learning to say no. This is critical, especially as you take on more in your leadership responsibilities. So, Tori, can you share an experience where setting boundaries helped you in your role?
Actually, I'm not very good at that. But I'm just telling myself the game's not over yet, and I'm still working on this. Actually, one of the things I'm working through with my therapist right now.
I love that. Staci, what about you?
It's just simple, we're all in the thick of year end. And so, our new president comes to me and wants me to learn something new or take on something new. And I was just honest. I can't get to this until, X date, or is there somebody else better that's suited to learn this? It was, an IT related thing. So instead of being hard-headed like I am and saying, yes, I got it, and then going home and being completely short and angry with my family, it's just setting that boundary and saying no.
And then Rebekah, what about you?
Yeah, I drive by this Dunkin' Donuts multiple times a day that you can't get out of the parking lot. And somebody asked me to stop by there and pick up a coffee for a CFMA meeting, actually. And I was on the phone and it was our former president. I said, no, I can't go in that parking lot. And it was so hard for me to tell this person no. I mean, I felt terrible, but it's obviously a joke at this point. And they ended up doing the task and afterwards said, I completely understand why you said no.
Rebekah, when you said no, did you feel guilty?
Oh, absolutely. At the same time, it was rooted in something that they also understood later. So,
A learning experience, which transitions nicely into us talking about being an ally. So, based on your experience, Rebekah, what have your male peers or leaders done to champion and support your professional growth?
I think when they give you honest, feedback, that's a huge thing. And when they encourage you to take bold steps, somebody in our CFMA chapter encouraged me to present 5 years ago to put together a presentation, and I did, and it led to incredible things. And it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't have encouraged me to take that step and seen something in me.
Yeah, and for me, our original owner here has always championed for women. When he started this company, his daughter was actually our head estimator at the time, and his wife was the head of accounting. His son's now our current president, and he's carried on this tradition, or just way of life, really, for them of never thinking twice about putting women in positions that maybe have not been traditional female roles, such as back in 2013, we had our first female safety director. We've hired females for the field whenever they've applied. And I've personally always felt supported to grow here. And I was asked to join our board of directors as the first female in 2021. So they've definitely set the tone for our culture from the beginning in this manner. And I'm very grateful to work for them as allies for females in the industry.
Well, there's one thing before we go that I want to have us discuss. So we often talk about male allies, but in reality, not all women support other women in leadership roles. There's a well-documented phenomenon of women facing resistance from other women in their careers. So if any of you ever experienced this, and what can we do as leaders to ensure we're truly uplifting each other rather than reinforcing these barriers?
I can take this one. So we're all competitive in nature at some point, and assuming we don't want each other's jobs and cutthroat, I tried to train my team. We have a bunch of young mothers, so shout out to all the working moms who are doing the hustle. Like, you're acknowledged that you wake up early, get your child ready, pack lunches, you work away from home, and the list goes on, and have a social life. I have, as a leader, to have empathy for the hustle that the women are doing, just come to work and make things happen. So, it's understanding each other, where they're coming from, and every stage in your life is different, and supporting each other through it.
And Rebekah, I know you had a pretty interesting story to share.
Yeah, I was asked to start a Women of X company about 10 years ago, and I realized before I did that there'd been some girl on girl crime at that company, and I was a part of it, so I had to repent of how I treated other women before I could be the leader of this group. And so we kind of just started with that clean slate and realized that instead of maybe dragging our male bosses into places that we weren't getting along, like, let's talk to each other one-on-one, peer-to-peer, and kind of go through that.
Yeah, I love that. So I know that our time is up. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I'm going to go through kind of the wrap up, and if there's any questions that come up, I will certainly ask our panelists. Just so you're aware, if you want to talk to any of us, if you need advice, if you need to reach out, if you need somebody to be an ally, we are more than happy to chat with you. So please feel free to reach out if you need anything from us. Additionally, we have some great webinars coming up, so feel free to check those out. For those of you here today for the CPE credit, the code that you will use today is LEADER. And last but not least, I am working for a technology company. So if any of you would like to learn about what ProNovos does, or if you have questions about your tech stack planning, I do have some great worksheets that I could share with you that will help you go through the process that I showed you that I documented. So if you'd like to talk with me, whether it's about the generational stuff or, even speaking at your chapter about anything, I am more than happy to volunteer my services and assist you with that. So I'm going to check to see if we have any questions. And I don't see that we do. So I would just like to thank each and every one of you for your time today. You all are phenomenal women, and I am so grateful to know you and see what you are doing in this industry. And I look forward to seeing how your guys' careers progress. So for those of you joining us today, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah.